Welcome to our podcast. I'm Emauri Gaspar. I'm CTO of Central IT. Today we have a special guest, David Cannon, to talk about digital transformation based on ITIL 4 and how artificial intelligence can support this process. So, David, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Emauri. I'm David Cannon. I work with Peoplecert. I'm the Director of Americas. And I have for many years been contributing as an author to ITIL publications.
Jouber, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jouber. I work at Central IT for like 10 years, and I work at the moment as a solution manager. So, David, for begin, just to make sure we are on the same page, why is digital transformation so important today? And what are the main benefits that companies can get from digital transformation using ITIL 4?
I think the main reason why it is so important is because it's unavoidable. New technology is emerging. It is changing the demands of customers and citizens. And if we're not able to respond to those demands, we're not going to be able to stay in business. So it's really not a matter of, is there a benefit to do it? It is absolutely critical that we do digital transformation. Why ITIL 4? I think ITIL 4 gives us a toolkit that allows us to manage digital technology throughout the organization. In ITIL v3, we look primarily at how the IT department managed information technology. That's changed. With digital technology, that technology is in use and it's being managed throughout the organization. What ITIL 4 does is it looks at how to manage digital technology, whether it's based in the IT department or whether it's being managed within a business unit.
Oh, perfect. So, what are the biggest obstacles companies face when starting their transformation digital journey?
I think there's a lot of obstacles. One of the main ones is people underestimate what it means to perform or to undergo digital transformation. Many organizations start with a single activity within the organization and they automate that and they think that is digital transformation. But what they soon realize is that as they introduce new technology, the culture of the organization starts to change. The behavior of employees and customers in the organization start to change. And so people are often caught by surprise by how extensive the changes are when you introduce new technology. I think the other obstacle is people not wanting to change. This is standard for any kind of project. There's this resistance to change. We have people who are used to the organization working in a certain way, feel that by changing that, they would make the organization unsuccessful. And so it's very important to convince those people that if they do not make the changes, the organization will not be as relevant. I think those are some of the obstacles. There are a number of others as well. You know, for example, some organizations will say, well, we're not going to transform. What we're going to do is we're going to deploy a tool, and that will transform us anyway, automatically. And of course, that doesn't work because the transformation is part of what people are doing within the organization. Transformation happens because people transform the organization using technology. It's not by putting the technology in that just is going to automatically transform the organization. And I think the final one is by being too ambitious, by trying to transform too many things at the same time. You really have to break it down into the things that are most important first, things that you can achieve first, building those, and then incrementing the transformation over time. It's an evolution, it's a journey. It's not just a single change that happens all at once.
We have to keep it simple, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Very good application of ITIL principles.
Yes.
They're excellent.
So can you give us an example of successful digital transformation project using ITIL 4?
Yeah, I'd like to select one which was implemented by an organization as a whole, not just a part of an organization. This was an organization that wasn't sure how to use digital technology and what it meant for their business. So what they did is they allowed the business units to go and buy cloud solutions. And that's what they did. What they then realized is that the business units had bought or invested in duplicate solutions. There was a lot of overlap between the solutions. So instead of investing in technology that would make them more efficient, it made the organization more complex. What they did is a project that was driven by the chief operations officer. And that was very important to me. It didn't come from a single department or the IT department. It came from the chief operations officer who had oversight of the whole organization. And what they did is they identified the value streams in that organization, how all of the departments work together to contribute to the value stream in that organization. And they then aligned the activities of each of the departments and identified a single solution that met all of the departments' needs. Not only that, but the whole organization started working differently. All the manual activities were automated, and they were connected between the departments so that there was collaboration between the departments, all using digital technology. And the whole culture of the organization changed. One of the most important changes was the way they viewed governance. Before, governance was seen as, oh, that's IT's department. We don't have to worry about who makes decisions. It's the IT department that makes the decisions. The IT department will fix everything. And through this project, what the business departments or the business units started to realize is we're responsible for the technology. We're responsible for how it's used. And we're responsible for supporting the IT group in their activities. They're responsible for supporting us in our activities. There was a huge change that was made in this organization.
Great.
So, David, what advice would you give to companies starting the digital transformation?
I think the most important thing is to define your digital strategy. I know it sounds like a very big thing to do, but if you don't know where you're going with digital technology, what are you going to implement? What are you going to transform? How are you going to know that you've been successful? So for me, the strategy is the most important thing. The other reason why I suggest strategy is because strategy is able to align the business, in fact, the whole organization, from the most senior level of executive all the way through the organization. A lot of organizations start their digital transformation process with a particular business problem in one or two business units. And they then make the transformation and using their success, try to sell their success to the rest of the organization. It takes a lot longer time. Executives in the organization then have to understand it, they have to buy into it, and then they have to communicate it. Start at the beginning, create the strategy, make sure that you then break the strategy down into pieces that can be delivered. Maybe the first one is a project between two business units, but start it at a strategy. Make sure that everybody knows that when that's finished, the next thing to happen is going to be that, so that everybody can set their expectations correctly and be prepared.
Perfect. So AI is in everywhere. Every place we see AI. In what ways can AI support digital transformation efforts?
So I think it's important to know that AI plays two roles. One is AI is a disruptor. AI is one of the things that we have to design a strategy for. So we have to understand how we're going to use AI, what role it's going to play in our transforming organization. And then on the other side, we can use AI as input and as a support tool for our digital transformation process. It's important to remember that AI in this context is not only generative AI. It is also the process automation. It's also the collaboration tools that we need to use. It's the reporting tools and the monitoring and measurement tools that we have to use. AI, for example, can help identify dependencies that we weren't initially able to see because we didn't know. But AI can go and investigate and find out what the linkages are. And, well, if you change this, then you're going to impact that. AI can help us to identify those so that, we don't make mistakes in our transformation. And then as far as generative AI goes, another important point about generative AI is remember that generative AI is based on things that exist already. Digital transformation, though, is looking at things that do not yet exist. So we should be very careful to use AI to tell us what to do when we're doing digital transformation. It can certainly help us to put some plans together, put a communication document together, but it is based on things that already exist. So be aware of that limitation, and it can certainly help speed up some of the administrative work involved in your digital transformation program.
Okay, perfect. So, high velocity IT. I love this term. What companies need to do to reach this level?
Well, high velocity IT is partly a set of capabilities, but it's also partly a mindset. It's a culture within the organization. If we look at high velocity IT, one of the prime examples of that is the DevOps movement. And DevOps introduces a number of techniques, a number of approaches. They're based on things like lean and quality management and so on. But the most important thing about DevOps is the cultural change that happens. It's this idea that we have to move quickly, we have to be agile, we need to be able to make mistakes, we need to be able to learn from those mistakes and change direction very quickly. And that is a completely different culture to the culture that existed in a more traditional organization where it takes months and years to make a change in products. So for me, achieving that mindset is very important. And of course, doing that requires education, certification, such as the HVIT certification, DevOps certification. But more important than the certification is the practice. Creating the teams, allowing them to learn from their experience, allowing them to fail and learn from their failures. I think that's very important. One thing I would add, though, is that it's very important. We tend to think of HVIT as create the teams and let them manage themselves. But it's very important to create a governance structure which orchestrates between the teams. We don't want teams going off in all kinds of different directions and introducing new policies that may harm the organization or damage some linkage within the organization. And so the governance that you use, it's different to traditional governance, which is more about applying rules and making sure the rules are followed. The governance within HVIT organizations, digital organizations, is more of a coordinating, orchestrating governance. And it's very important to put that layer in.
Since you have mentioned the DevOps, what are the biggest benefits a company can expect from implementing DevOps?
The biggest benefit, I think, is the ability to move quickly. Digital technology is very disruptive. It is innovated very quickly. So you can be working on a project going in one direction and suddenly find there is a new technology which changes the project. It changes the solution, it changes the way you're working. DevOps really helps us to respond to that very quickly, to be very agile in the way that we're working. To me, that's probably the biggest benefit. There is another benefit that organizations talk about when they're implementing DevOps, and that is the resolution of this conflict between the traditional conflict between development teams and operational teams. And I think it does help to do that. But there's a very important but. That is, you cannot resolve this conflict if you force one of the teams to become like the other team. So you cannot have DevOps being used to make operations behave like developers, and you cannot use DevOps to make developers behave like operators. It's a different skill set, it's a different way of working, They need to be aligned. They need to be in a continual cycle of development and delivery, but they are different skill sets. So one of the benefits is, yes, we can overcome this conflict. We can overcome the barriers between these teams. But as long as we recognize that the teams are different and that their skills are different and their ways of working are different,
They can work together.
they can and should work together. Yeah.
I think implement DevOps not so easy. I think there are a lot of challenges. So, what the biggest challenge you and your team faced?
For me, when I've worked in companies that are adopting DevOps as well as service management, the biggest challenge I find is that teams don't believe that DevOps will really help them because they feel afraid to leave their waterfall type approach behind. They don't really believe that DevOps is rigorous. They think that it's going to be difficult to test their work in a good way. And so they're nervous about the results of this. And of course, it's very important for them to realize that failure is okay, because you're not failing in a year's worth of development work. No, you're failing in a single sprint, and you're failing in something that can be recovered and corrected very quickly. And that takes a very important cultural shift in people's minds. So that's probably been the biggest obstacle that we faced.
Is there any practice in DevOps that you think is essential for success?
Well, I think they're all essential, but for me, the one where DevOps is most likely to have difficulty is in the transfer. Continuous development, continuous delivery, that interface between the development and the delivery and operation phase. So that deploy, release into operate, that movement, that transfer that happens during that cycle is, to me, the most critical, because it's what enables the product that has been developed to achieve its value. And if the people operating it don't understand how it should be operated best, it's not going to work. If the people developing it don't understand the dependencies that need to be in place in operations, it's not going to work. So for me, I think that's probably the most critical component.
Okay, so talking about artificial intelligence, how artificial can improve this process?
I think the part of artificial intelligence that really helps with DevOps is the visibility. It's being able to track exactly where things are in the life cycle. It's being able to track the impact of the work that you've done. So for me, visibility is a very important part of DevOps. The ability to measure and track and determine whether something has succeeded or not is very important. And AI really excels at identifying those things. So I think that's one of the primary uses of AI in DevOps. There are others, of course. I heard today someone say, but we can just get AI to do the coding for us within the build phase. Yeah. Sure, you can try that.
Show us the result.
Show us the result. And I think there is some value in getting generative AI to do some of the initial work for us, but I don't feel that there's any organization I know that would be comfortable just cutting and pasting code from an AI tool and pasting, and that's it. That goes. No, there's a lot of work. It may help to solve a problem that you're struggling with, but it has to be checked. It has to be tested. And in fact, using AI means that we have to be more rigorous than when we're doing it without AI in that case.
Can you share a story with us where DevOps really made a difference in a project?
Yeah, it was, strangely enough, the example I'm thinking of was a healthcare organization, and they were introducing a new tool, but it was a service management tool. And instead of using their traditional project management approach, they decided they were going to introduce DevOps as a way of building their service management tool. And the reason they did that was because they did not feel that the organization had a complete picture of what they wanted the service management tool to do. So they wanted to start with the pieces that they had a very good understanding with and get those built, and then move to the areas where they had to do some more investigations, some more requirements analysis, and so on. They used DevOps as an approach to implement this tool, and it not only implement the tool, but to customize it as well. And it worked very well because, first of all, they built on the strengths that they had. But then, when they weren't sure about what to do, they could experiment. So they tried something, and with their service catalog, they tried to create a service catalog, and it didn't work too well because they let all of the individual teams define their own services, and within 2 days they had 600 services, and most of them were not services. So they said, okay, let's stop that. And it took them just a week to learn that lesson, and then they could plan, how are we going to do this? Because that didn't work. So in fact, imagine spending 3 months developing a service catalog only to find that it wasn't going to work. It's a waste of 3 months. Well, they did it within a couple of weeks. So very successful. And the second reason it was successful was because they had a digital team in the healthcare organization that was focusing on digital healthcare. And they had some really good ideas, but they needed the operations teams to support those ideas. So this DevOps team was able to take the ideas from the digital developers and figure out how to get the operations teams involved. And so DevOps really worked at both of those levels.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Talk more about ITIL 4, the guiding principles of ITIL 4. Which one do you find most interesting and why?
So which is your favorite child? No.
Good.
I have to say, I find it very difficult to come to one. I can narrow it down to 3, but they happen in sequence, so it's almost like one. The first one is start where you are. I think too many people try to focus on some dream that they have about something they want to do in the future, and they immediately try to implement it without really understanding where they are today. And they then realize, well, we don't have the capabilities. We don't have the culture. We don't have the data. And they then have to go back and start again. So for me, start where you are. Recognize who you are, what you're doing, and understand where you're weak, where you don't have the capabilities that you need. It's really important to recognize that. So start where you are. The second one is focus on value. So what do I do first? The thing that's most valuable. For some people, that's the thing that's causing the most pain. So I remove the pain. Maybe that's the value that they're looking for. For other people, it's a business need. We need to increase revenues, or we need to reach a new marketplace, whatever that is. But there is something that is valuable to the organization. That's an important one for me, because very often in service management, we're talking about ITIL, in service management, we tend to focus on the thing that is most important to us as service managers. But actually, you get a lot further if you focus on what's valuable to the organization. What are our strategic objectives? What is most important to the executive who is sponsoring our project? What's gonna make them successful? If we focus on those items, I think then we can be more successful. So that's the second one. And then the third one is really progress iteratively with feedback. So that tells me where to start, what to do first, and then how we proceed to do more and more over time. And it's not building the whole thing at once and then releasing it. It's doing one thing at a time and becoming more and more successful as we build the service management program or the digital transformation program, whatever the scope.
Am I doing it right? Right? So how does IT4 help improve holistic services? Like, I want to change my lamp, for example, as a request.
So what ITIL 4 has done is it's taken what we learned from how IT manages services, and it applies it across multiple environments. So whether you're HR, or whether you're a financial manager, or whether you're a factory, there are things that we have learned from the management of technology that can be applied in those situations. And so I think ITIL 4 really helps provide us with guidelines. Remember, because most of the things that you're talking about are enabled by some form of digital technology, whereas before they weren't. They were more manual kind of processes and more manual activities. So it was difficult to explain why ITIL was relevant. Well, today, those activities are supported by digital technology. They may be partially manual, but they also have a lot of automation involved. And ITIL can really help to achieve that. So we see a lot of talk about things like what people are calling enterprise service management, where we're applying service management principles across the enterprise. There are two levels of that, though. The one level is take what you learned in IT and apply it to one other department. For example, let's create a service desk for the HR department. That's certainly going to be helpful, but it is not digital transformation. Digital transformation is when we say, if our organization is a service provider, how do we manage the entire organization as an integrated service provider using ITIL 4 principles? And one of the most interesting projects I worked on was a railway company. They wanted to use ITIL to manage their train scheduling, their maintenance scheduling, their passenger handling. It was really interesting and it was very effective because ITIL had guidelines that did not exist within their industry.
Oh, yeah. Great. So, what challenges did you find when implementing ITIL 4 in organizations?
Again, it's not just one set of challenges. There's one set of challenges with people who've adopted ITIL v3, and they now are looking to move to ITIL 4. And I think that is probably a challenge already. Why are you just moving to ITIL 4? Is that the reason you're doing it? No, there should be a bigger reason than that. So for me, organizations that want to adopt ITIL 4 and move to ITIL 4 understand what it is you want to achieve by using ITIL 4. ITIL v3 was designed for IT departments providing internal services to business units. If that's what you're doing, fine. Carry on doing that. Use the ITIL 4 guidelines in the practices because they're more up to date. So in incident management, for example, we talk about more up-to-date techniques like swarming and so on. By all means, use the same structure that you had for v3. Use the updated materials in ITIL 4, but don't try to migrate your whole organization to 4. Yeah, merge them. ITIL 4 becomes a migration when we really want to support a more digital or a holistic transformation effort, where we're now applying ITIL principles across a broader component or broader part of the business. And that's where it becomes most valuable. So understanding the scope of ITIL 4 is really important. And if you don't understand the scope, then it can be a big obstacle. I think one of the other obstacles that I face in this is ITIL 4 is not a digital transformation handbook. It doesn't instruct you on how to do digital transformation. What it does do is it gives you tools and techniques and says, if you're doing digital transformation, you should be using these. So here's how you would deal with strategy as part of digital transformation. Here's how you would deal with capacity and the variations of demand that you're having throughout your organization and the shifting demand patterns that happen in your organization. This is how you deal with those. But it's not going to say, okay, step 1, digital transformation, start here. Step 2, go there. And I think people sometimes expect that from ITIL. But it's not going to do that because every organization is unique. So we'd rather give you a set of tools and then allow you to use those tools. And I think that can be an obstacle for people as well.
I agree. Can you share a success story where ITIL 4 was crucial?
Yes, again, I think the question answered about where digital transformation was successful, it's the same company. And just a bit of background, this was a housing development company. It developed large housing complexes, especially for low-income groups. And ITIL 4 was really important, not because they used ITIL 4, but because they took the principles of ITIL 4 and they applied those principles. So principles like identify the value stream was very important. If they didn't identify the value stream, then we would still have 3 different business units using 3 different solutions that overlap. And that's very inefficient. And by the way, it was a real problem for them because they couldn't transfer data to each other. And the first group needed to provide data to the second group. You needed to provide data to the third group. Well, they couldn't do it because there were 3 different systems that didn't talk to each other, even though they were in the cloud and all data is accessible in the cloud. No, it wasn't. So using the ITIL 4 principle of starting with the value stream and identifying what the value streams were throughout the business, and then figuring out, okay, how do we support those value streams? Where do we use technology? If we're going to use technology, which technology do we use? And little things. For example, they had to do secure signing of legal documents. Well, there are a few different options out there, and each department had selected their own one for different reasons. What we had to do is go and sit down with them and look at all of the reasons. Why do you want this one? Why do you want that one? Which of those requirements were legitimate and which were just, we like it better? We had to sit down, and to do that, we created an IT steering committee. This is an old concept, but it was very important to institute that governance layer. And governance in ITIL 4 is very important as an orchestrating layer. That's what we did. We used the steering committee for that. We got everybody into the same room and said, okay, here's what we have. We can't seem to get a decision out of anybody, so now we're going to put it to the steering committee, present your case, and together we'll make a decision. So that collaboration that happens. So ITIL 4 principles were very important in that transformation that happened.
Okay, I need to talk more about AI. So
Yes.
how AI can support and improve ITIL 4 practices.
So again, I think AI is and has been an important part of ITIL 4, even before Gen AI became a big hype. If we go through the practices within ITIL 4, every one of those practices talks about the need for automation. In the last refresh of ITIL 4, we expanded that section to include AI. And what was very interesting, so in each of the practice guides, you will see a section on how to use AI within that particular practice. But what's interesting is that a lot of the uses for AI are for traditional purposes. Metrics, reporting on performance. One very important one that we've always struggled with is service mapping. So creating the architecture of services, what fits together, what's related to which piece. It's really important because if you don't have that information, it's difficult to create a CMDB. If you don't have a CMDB, it's very important to control the environment. So AI is really helpful in defining those relationships between service components and for monitoring the use of them over time, which we can't do as human beings. We're just not fast enough, and we don't detect relationships as easily or correlations as easily. So we found things like monitoring and things like problem identification and incident identification, automatic detection of certain incidents, for example, or events or changes or things that we want to manage. Being able to identify them and then using AI to understand what's involved, what the dependencies are, what the relationships are. That has been extremely helpful. Of course, there's the use cases of people saying, well, we need to create a new process. Let's just use ChatGPT to tell us what the steps should be. And we start with that, and then we say, oh, well, that's good. I didn't think of that. The important thing, if you're going to use generative AI like that, is by all means start with generative AI and what it produces. Do not cut and paste. Use that as input and then apply it into your organization. You've probably thought of everything that was reported on the AI already, but it can be a helpful checklist. Did you include everything that you should? But I would also say that Gen AI is not always complete. It only tells you what it knows and what it can find. I've done a number of tests on this to see, okay, tell me about this. And I'm expecting specific answers because I know what the answer is, and it doesn't find it. It just misses that. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the way I put the prompt in. But, well, again, that's another challenge with AI. This whole new discipline, even science, of prompt engineering. So AI is supposed to make it easy. We could just tell it what we want and it tells us back. No, we have to have a whole science behind how to get the right answer out of AI. There's a whole new job category that's emerging. Anyway, that's a whole different category.
What resources, books, courses, communities do you recommend for professionals wanting to dive deeper into these topics?
So for me, the most important resource that people have is other professionals in the field. Yes, we can read the ITIL books. They're available. Of course, you can read those. Within the ITIL books, there are reading lists. You can go and access those books. And they're not altogether up to date. So I prefer to take that as a starting point. That tells me what I need to know as a starting point. And then what I'd like to do is look for other professionals in the field who are also doing the things that I'm trying to do. And get information from them. I find a lot of reading recommendations from individuals in the field. I find a lot of people telling me that I was wrong about something that I wrote, and here's a better way of doing it, and that's fantastic. I love it when that happens. I don't like them telling me I'm wrong, but I do like them educating me about a better way to do things. And these, unfortunately, the forums that existed for this to happen, they're not as strong as they used to be. So we're really working on addressing that. So using platforms like Peoplecert Plus, for example, to start creating virtual events and physical events where people can interact is incredibly important for me.
So, David, to finish, okay, are there any common mistakes companies should avoid when implementing these methodologies?
I made a few notes of some of the things that I think I think one of the most common. I don't know that it's a mistake. Maybe it is a mistake, but for me, the most important starting point for anything is the strategy. Okay. You need to have defined the strategy, and I think too many organizations and professionals launch a project without having without linking it to the enterprise strategy. Yes, they may have a strategy for the project, but that's not enough. We need to understand how the strategy for the project enables the strategy for our business unit, and how the strategy of our business unit enables the strategy of the business. If we don't do that, it's going to be very difficult for us to make sure that the transformation that we're trying to achieve is successful. It has to achieve something that is more strategic. I think another mistake that's often made is people consider the work that they did with ITIL 10 years ago or for the last 10 years as being old. Yeah, there needs to be something better. There needs to be something new. But I have to say, the basic disciplines that we used in ITIL V1 into ITIL 2, into ITIL V3, and now in ITIL 4, they are still valid. If something breaks, you need to fix it. Incident management. If you're going to change something, make sure you understand what the impact of that change is. Change management, or change enablement as we call it now. Now, the application of those things may change. And maybe you need to look at updating these things, but do not throw them away. They're not old. They're basic disciplines that are absolutely essential. The third error I think that is often made And it's because there has been a lot of talk about agile and DevOps and ITIL, and we have people moving into different tribes. And I am a DevOps person, I am an ITIL person, I'm an agile person, and they don't want to listen to each other. And I think that's a mistake. I think that all of them are important. For example, I heard a case yesterday where an organization was convinced by somebody that everything that they do must be managed as a product. And it's impossible. Services are not products. Processes are not products, right? They're different. They have to be managed differently. And if you try and manage everything as a service, or everything as a product, or everything as a process, you're going to fail. It may take a long time, but you're going to fail. So don't do that. Recognize that products exist and they're managed in a certain way. Recognizes that service exists, they're managed in a certain way, but make sure they're linked. Make sure those interfaces happen. And one of the big obstacles I see is organizations who are unable to get these groups to overcome their differences and work together. It can be a real problem. So yeah, I think that's an important key to success. Get those teams, recognize that they're different, and figure out how to get them to work together.
Perfect. So
It's a great one.
So that's it.
Yes.
So David, thank you so much to share with us your knowledge. Thank you so much.